Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Ream, and I am the Executive Director of the Arc of Erie County and Regional Trust Liaison with the Achieva Family Trust. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us today. We have two really great presenters that will be giving us really helpful information on Social Security scams and adult protective services. I'd like to introduce Kathy Freeman from the Pennsylvania Link, who is one of our partners for today's presentation, to say a few words. Kathy?
Thank you, Catherine. I was asked to just briefly mention what the Pennsylvania Link is all about. I am the local coordinator for Erie, Crawford, Venango, Clarion, and Warren Forest counties. The Pennsylvania Link is a part of the nationwide Aging and Disability Resource Centers, and these were created to help consumers get help when they need it. We strive to create networks of different providers and organizations and agencies who work with both aging and persons with disabilities, because what we want is a no wrong door approach. So if someone is struggling to try and find help, they don't need to be looking through a telephone book, which not too many people get telephone books any longer. And if you do, the print is so small, you can't read what's in the telephone book. So it's really hard to start hunting for help because there's a lot of help out there. So the Pennsylvania Link, they do strive to have a no wrong door approach. So if someone comes across our good friend Catherine Ream from Achieva Family Trust, and they tell her, I'm having all kinds of problems and I don't know where to start. Is there anything that you can do to help me? Well, Catherine and all of our other Link partners, they have a wealth of information that they can share with people who do need help to get them in the right direction. And oftentimes it's too overwhelming for a person to even make a lot of calls to places because they might not be feeling that well. They might be just too tired and too stressed. So Catherine could offer to make phone calls on their behalf and have these agencies, organizations, and businesses call the person who does need help so that it's not so stressful for them. We just want people to be able to get the help and the information they need. And this is really the best way that we could think of to try and do this. And it seems to work out very well because all of these people, they have, again, a wealth of information at their fingertips, and we look to them to help people when they need that. And also the Pennsylvania Link does have a statewide helpline for people who may call that number, and then they would be redirected to a Pennsylvania Link partner. And that telephone number is 1-800-753-8827. It does operate Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., and it does exclude holidays. But again, the link is here to help people so that you don't have to do so much work and hunting to try and get help. So that is what we do with the Pennsylvania Link, and we're very grateful for all of the wonderful partners who so readily signed up to be a part of this big group. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. The Arc of Erie County and Achieva really appreciate the partnership that we've been able to establish with Kathy Freeman and the Pennsylvania Link and the Department of Aging. As Kathy said, all of our partners work at different organizations and have lots and lots of experience, and we have vast information to hand out to people. So really grateful that you were able to join us today, Kathy, and talk a little bit about the link. Kate is our interpreter for today. And our speakers are Frank Magny from the Social Security Administration and Matt Trott from the Area Agency on Aging, GCAC, in Erie. So Frank is going to go first, and we're going to hold questions until each presenter's information has finished. They finish their presentation. And then once Frank is done, we'll read the questions in the chat, and then we'll hand it off to Matt. And again, I'd really just like to thank Matt and Frank for their partnership. Really appreciate all that you do to help many Pennsylvanians across the state every single day. So really grateful for both of you. Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Catherine. It's super nice of you. I am the Central Pennsylvania Public Affairs Specialist. I service field offices throughout Central Pennsylvania, minus Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. But more importantly, I'd worked in the field office for 12 years previous to taking this position. So I have a lot of real world experience as far as individuals that come in contact with scams and identity theft. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of get into it and come at it from a knowledge-based perspective. But just to kind of introduce my portion of the presentation, I wanted to talk about some newly released data from the Federal Trade Commission, and I'll talk more about their role in identity theft and scams here in just a moment. But for 2023, so this is fresh off the press. Consumers reported losing more than $10 billion to fraud in 2023, marking the first time that fraud losses have reached that benchmark. And that's a 14% increase over reported losses in 2022. So what we see and what we're experiencing is growing at an exponential rate. Online shopping issues were the second most commonly reported. I'll get to the first here in just a moment. Reported in the fraud categories, followed by prizes, sweepstakes, lotteries, investment-related reports, and businesses and job opportunity scams. So there's so much going on out there. People are inundated with so many opportunities to be ripped off. Another first, though, in 2023 is the method scammers reportedly used to reach consumers. Previous to 2023, those were phone calls, and we here at the Social Security Administration got very, very extensive reports of phone scams that are taking place. But now email displays text messages, which held the top spot in 2022 after decades of phone calls being the most common. Phone calls are still the second most common reported contact method for fraud in 2023, followed by text messages. So the scammers are starting to evolve a little bit, but I think you still have equal parts chances of encountering scams, whether it be text messages, emails, or phone calls. Next slide, please. So as far as the Social Security Administration is concerned and scam and identity theft awareness, the Social Security number really is what looms largest over our involvement. As you can see here, from our perspective, the Social Security number is a method in which our administration uses to track your earnings throughout your lifetime. It does live a double life as a very important personal identifier. However, just as we talk about the Social Security number, we do recommend that you keep that piece of information as confidential as possible. You should be careful about sharing the number, even when it's asked. Sometimes you'll find situations in which it might not be necessary, or you might not even end up signing up for that credit card offer or whatnot, knowing that you might be sharing this personal piece of information to a place that you might not trust. Keep your cards and your documents that show your Social Security number in a safe place. From that standpoint, we recommend that you do not carry your card. It should not be in your wallet. There's only a few times in your life that you really have to produce the card. So from that standpoint, maybe a place where you keep your passport, maybe the case that you would keep anything kind of maybe in a fireproof box. But there's so much about the Social Security number that the Social Security Administration can't control. Because it is used as a personal identifier, it does have this life of its own that we can't necessarily control for you. And I'll talk more about that as I go along here. But can I go to the next slide, please? We, of course, have gotten just inundated with reports, and the Social Security Administration itself has gone out of its way to make sure that individuals are aware of these types of scams. To me, this is one of the most important presentations that I do provide. I'm going to probably do this over maybe about 10 times over the spring in what we call Slam the Scam. It's an initiative by the Social Security Administration because we know that This is a problem. This is a problem for our agency. It undermines our ability to service you. And that gets me to the number one thing, as I go back to that FTC data, is that the FTC received fraud reports from 2.6 million consumers last year, nearly the same amount as 22. But the most commonly reported scam category was imposter scams, which saw significant increases in both business and government impersonators. So there we go. Even though these scams and identity theft have a lot life larger than necessarily we can control, we know that this is probably somebody calling you on the phone, someone text messaging, someone emailing you are going to try to impersonate another agency. It could be the Social Security Administration. It could be the IRS. It could be I think a common scam I'm seeing nowadays is tracking information through, UPS or so. What they're trying to do is they're trying to trick you into convincing you that they are an entity that you should trust, and so doing, clicking on their links or talking to their individuals or sharing your information to these imposters is the most common way that people are being scammed right now. So we all have to be very, very leery of what's kind of taking place here. But while I have the opportunity right now, just want to bring your attention to these bullets because from Social Security standpoints, we've really galvanized ourselves to make sure that our own business practices come in line with how we can best do business with everybody. But we do not contact citizens, generally those who have ongoing business with Social Security by telephone for customer service purposes. Now, we of course set up appointments with individuals so that we'll be contacting you at a predetermined time. And then let's say, for example, if you did have benefits and you're going through some of the different processes that we go through, you're going to be contacted by mail in advance of that. We very, very rarely cold call. I have a couple different workloads where I have to go out of my way to make sure I contact individuals by mail before I would cold call. So that just kind of gives for individuals on the call, that just gives you the sense that you should be leery that somebody might be calling you out of nowhere, threatening you, stating that there's going to be a fraud hold on your Social Security benefits and things of that sort. But that brings me to that next point here on the slide, that we're never going to threaten you. From that standpoint, we are public servants. The mandate of our agency is to provide you the best service possible, to find you the entitlements that you worked and paid into for the majority of your lifetime. And you'll find, if you are talking to a Social Security representative, you'll find that there's going to be no kind of hard selling or threats or legal action. Those types of things should all be red flags if you think that you're talking to somebody from Social Security, not only Social Security, but most federal agencies that you might be coming in contact with. And then just honestly, as offensive as it is, somebody is contacting you by phone, I just highly recommend just hanging up on these individuals. From that standpoint, those calls that you might be getting from unknown sources, emails you might be getting from unknown sources, text messages, as much as it kind of bores a hole in your mind as to what that was about, nowadays I can pretty much tell you majority of the time it's somebody that's trying to scam you. So from that standpoint, please, that's kind of how you do have to operate. It's changing how Social Security has to do their own business, but it also should change how you do your business when it comes to people calling you or contacting you on your phone. Next slide, please. Okay. So 3 things we just want to kind of make everybody aware of. Number one, and that's not slided here, is that in my experience, the elderly community is most at risk to these types of situations that are taking place. So for me, it takes a team of individuals, and we're going to talk more about that with the next speaker. But I do like to kind of highlight that because these individuals did not grow up in the society that maybe younger generations were able to do. For them, when people used to call them on the phone, there was some kind of business that would have been conducted. And of course, I even remember that time when our phone used to ring. It was going to be somebody on the other end that we had some type of a business with or a relationship with, but obviously not the case today in the case of databases and things of that sort. So it's very, very important that you do understand that there's so many threats that are coming your way. These scams are just so sophisticated. Impersonation, advanced fees, phishing scams, which is the ones where individuals are emailing you. They may contact you to claim to be from SSA, IRS, another governmental agency. They might claim that you've won a lottery, become eligible for an investment that you may pay an upfront fee for. They might design emails or text messages that look legitimate and request your immediate response. So from that standpoint, the most common schemes right now tend to be those ones that are done electronically. To my next point, please, 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 with everything, exercise caution. In general, no government agency or reputable company will call you and unexpectedly request your personal information or request advance fees for services in forms of wire transfers or gift cards. Always red flags if those become mentioned in any of that. But build a habit of verifying the identity of anyone who asks for your personal information over the phone, and say you will respond through the entity's customer service channels. Any employee within Central Pennsylvania will certainly understand that, especially from a cold calling standpoint. And if they don't, there's a high chance that they probably don't have any business with you. If anyone pressures you to provide information or money over the phone, it's a scam. You should just hang up. And then just be proactive about securing your information. Store your social security card in a secure location. Shred documents that have your personal identifiable information. And just a word about that. That goes beyond your social security number. That goes beyond mother's maiden name, things of that sort. Any type of document that collects different pieces of key data is in the same place, whether it be name, address, but it also can include healthcare information, are the ones that should not be just discarded so that they can be found after your trash is taken away. But the other situation about being proactive is potentially equipping your computer devices with strong antivirus software and maintain strong passwords, and regularly check your credit reports for special suspicious activities. And I'll talk more about that here later on. But from that standpoint, can we go to the next slide, please? All right. So as far as identity theft is concerned, basically, just another way to saying scams, per se, but these types of scenarios where an individual is going to use your private information to potentially open financial information from financial accounts in your names and things of that sort. Basically, they're trying to get the information about you to impersonate you. But going back to that FTC consumer data that I was talking about earlier in the presentation, there is consumers are losing more money to investment scams, more than 4.6 billion than any other category in 2023. This amount represents a 21% increase over 2022. The second highest reported loss amount came from imposter scams with losses near 2.7 billion. We talked about those. And then in 2023, consumers reported losing more money to bank transfers and cryptocurrency to all other methods combined. So other red flags there: bank transfers, gift cards, wire transfers, cryptocurrencies. So please, these are your information is what enables individuals to potentially defraud you of money, and it's happening more so than it ever had before. Next slide, please. Here, even though this slide was created by my agency and it talks about 2022 data, I went out of my way to get to 2023 data. It should show you, the increase over the numbers that I was kind of even talking about. And I do like how it does kind of put things into play there. 1 in 5 people lost money to an imposter scam in 2022, totaling more than $2.667 billion. So when we put the numbers in that perspective, we probably potentially know somebody, whether it be an acquaintance, a friend, a family member, that has potentially lost money to an imposter scam. And in so doing, this is why this is such an important topic for everybody to think about. Next slide, please. What I really, really like about this slide is it kind of goes into depth as to the different ways identity theft can take place. I kind of alluded to, just kind of that that standard line in which maybe someone will be taking all of your personal information, maybe opening a credit card, maybe opening a store card, and then running up charges on that. But as you can see here, identity theft kind of yields, kind of manifests itself in other areas. So an individual can use your personal identifiable information to open a utility account. They can apply for a tax refund, which is very, very common. This is something that I dealt with a lot when I worked at the field office level. And what you find is, in certain mixed custody situations with children, parents rushing there to file their taxes to get child tax care credits. And people are much more aware of this and much more excitable about this because of that pandemic era stimulus checks, in which so much was tied to how money was distributed because of information on tax returns. But sometimes people will be using your information to get a loan. They in rare cases, but still kind of takes place, and we are involved with this. Individuals use personal information to get a job. So you might potentially have somebody that in the country for the first time using information to get a job to be paid directly. But in some cases, this data goes to the Internal Revenue Service so that you might potentially owe back taxes on it, or in other cases, it can be incorrectly applied to your Social Security benefit. And then there's things that we have to do in the back end to have certain wages removed. But a very common one, and I wasn't even aware of this, but sometimes people use personal identifiable information to basically go in and get medical care. If a person has insurance, they want to pose as that person to potentially get medical care. As we probably know on this call right now, medical care is quite expensive. So there's a lot of motivation there. And then of course, as far as illegal use of the Social Security numbers, this just touches so many aspects of individuals' lives and creates so much stress. And as you can see, depending on where your information goes, it could appear in so many different places. And in one place, it could be a credit card that was open, but in another place, it could be that utility bill that you might be ending up on the hook for, and things of that sort. So it comes back to just that motivation of keeping and protecting your information as much as possible. Next slide, please. Okay. I love this slide. This is the slide if you're an advocate for individuals, or if you've been the victim or anything. But there are proactive steps that individuals should take if they feel like they are the victim of identity theft. They had that phone call. They got caught up in the strategy of the individual in obtaining those things. Many times they'll call our general inquiry line right away. But what we do recommend is for those legitimate accounts that you have, call the companies where the fraud had occurred, place a fraud alert to get on your credit reports, which I'll talk a little bit more about here. And then really, really great service. This is one of the things I'm most proud about when I make this presentation is the tools you now have at our Federal Trade Commission site. Now, I know I'm the Social Security Administration, that I'm a federal agency, and the Federal Trade Commission itself is a separate federal agency. But as a person who was the victim of identity theft, 10, 15 years ago, I now look at the resources that individuals have at this Federal Trade Commission site and realize that I had once purchased, I once, had an individual paid for an individual to help with the services that this site now provides for free. Next slide, please. This site, of course, is identitytheft.gov. Another great reminder, whenever you are doing business with a federal agency, that .gov suffix is what you always want to look for in web addresses. But as you can see on this slide, there are so many different services now provided at identitytheft.gov. But first and foremost, you're going to get information. They will ask you questions about the situation so that they can narrow down the different ways in which you could be potentially victimized. There is a personalized recovery plan that will be provided to you based off of how you answer the questions, and then basically advice to you of how to put that plan into action to prevent prevent what could the negatives of identity theft, but also proactively protect yourself in the future. All right, next slide, please. Here are some of the services that I was talking about. That personal recovery plan is really a great tool to navigate a situation where you probably get a lot of conflicting information as to what you're supposed to do. But these other services were some of the things that I actually paid for about 15 years ago when I was trying to buy a house for my family. And there was information about another individual of my same name on my credit report that was preventing me from getting a mortgage. Very, very stressful time in my life. That agency was the ones that created these identity theft affidavits so that I was able to document what had taken place and then report those to the different credit agencies to request that they be removed. But they also produce customized pre-filled letters to send to credit bureaus, businesses, and debt collectors. You're going to find this is a very, very common scenario that takes place if you are going through the process of kind of picking up the pieces after identity theft has taken place. These are the documents that you're going to need to go to each of the legitimate banks, the legitimate businesses and entities that you work with, so that you can document what had taken place. And then, of course, the plan and progress. It's really is an intuitive dashboard that will step by step take you to all the steps that you do need to take when these types of situations do take place. Next slide, please. As I kind of alluded to earlier in my part of the presentation, Social Security is involved with certain aspects of these scenarios, but there's certain things that we can't help you with. But first and foremost, outreach and education. As I told you, a very, very large campaign that is conducted by the Social Security Administration. It's called Slam the Scam. Actually, March 7th is Slam the Scam Day. So hopefully you'll be seeing, radio commercials, television commercials, PSAs, emails that go out to individuals that have my Social Security accounts. And then, of course, these presentations that I'll be conducting right now. We, of course, can replace and correct your Social Security number or card. In very, very rare instances, when things become way too out of control, we can potentially issue a new Social Security number. I've seen that in very, very rare instances. And I think in some cases, people think that would be a quick fix. It's not. But Social Security would help you through that process. But then we, of course, can verify your Social Security records. If you are getting benefits, by contacting us, we can make sure that your banking information or address hasn't been changed. As I alluded to previously about earnings, there are situations in which, the information of one individual is used to work. So from that standpoint, we will correct the earnings record of any individual that took place. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, what we can't do is correct your credit record. Those entities are private entities that are not involved with the federal government, but are actually loom large in your life. And I'll talk a little bit more about them here in a minute. But also, what we can't do is those ID theft reports. Some of the services provided by the Federal Trade Commission sites we're not involved with. Once again, once we kind of go through any kind of prevention measures or any way that the identity theft would affect you individually, as from a Social Security standpoint, there's going to be parts of this that we're not going to be involved with. And of course, on this last slide, we're quite busy. I know that there are many individuals, especially within Central Pennsylvania, in the 26 field offices that I service, probably would do whatever they can for an individual, but we have no standing as an advocate. We can't document and contact another agency and say this person was the victim of identity theft. So from that standpoint, we're obviously highly involved, but there's certain things that are really, really outside of our control. Next slide, please. Here is just a good resource. You're able to find this anywhere, most places, but from this standpoint, these are the 3 credit reporting agencies that basically loom large over your own financial life. And I think many of us know about credit scores and all of those types of situations. But a couple things I want to bring to your attention, and this has changed over the time in which I've been that I've had contact with these types of situations. But it used to cost money to put a fraud alert on each of these credit reporting agencies. And I will tell you that it's now free. And I will tell you, for most individuals, as you're older, and you know that the credit cards that you're going to have or the ones you're going to have and things of that sort, it's not a bad idea to proactively put a fraud report, a fraud hold on your credit report, so that from that standpoint, you really do have a preventive measure in order to make sure that new lines of credit, new financial accounts can't be open for you. But if you are the victim, you will have to work individually with each of these three credit reporting agencies in order to potentially remove information from your credit report. That's where those affidavits, that's where those reports, that's where maybe potentially a police report you might have to file will come into play. But this is how you do contact them. Next slide, please. Some other resources that will be included in my slides and distributed to anyone that would like. But of course, we do have plenty of phone numbers and web addresses for you to consult. As I told you, there is an industry that revolves around individuals that were the victim of identity theft. So, if you just kind of go in and put that into Google, you might be places where people want to charge you a fee. But those that are, working for the government are obviously that identitytheft.gov or ftc.gov. But then there's also the DMV and the other hotlines that you can contact. One last thing I want to touch upon with the next slide, please, is our website. Our website is different now than it was probably about 2 years ago. So if you haven't seen it in a while, it does have a new appearance. As I talked about with identitytheft.gov and ftc.gov, our website is ssa.gov. We changed the appearance a little bit to help navigate on smart devices, because more than 60% of individuals contact us through tablets and smartphones. But next slide, please. One way to potentially prevent a form of identity theft is to establish a ID.me or login.gov credentials so that a person can't come along and do that for you. For some individuals, that might be very difficult because of, they might not be digitally native. So that's a little bit of my messaging when it comes to online services nowadays. If you are a younger individual, I know I helped my dad with this process. So in my next slide here, when you are dealing with the federal government, it used to be you used to go to Social Security, you used to go to IRS, and you used to create your own username and password, separate credential for each site. It was convenient because you could still access things online. With Social Security, there's lots of benefits. With IRS, there's lots of benefits. But now there's just one universal credential that allows you to access Social Security, IRS, TSA PreCheck, Department of Education, and those two are what is known as login.gov, which is the federal government's credentialing service, or ID.me. ID.me is a little bit of a private entity, but I had contact with it. I'm a veteran. I get discounts from Lowe's, but ID.me was involved with identifying me in doing those types of situations. So there is this central place in which you have to get the credential done, but once it's done, you are able to access any federal government website. Next slide, please. One of the messages I do want individuals to kind of take away from my presentation, I had previously talked about, helping to protect our elderly community. The next part of the presentation is going to kind of highlight that more in depth. But if you do have somebody in your life that that they don't access the internet, one of the way that you can help them, though, as far as identity theft and scam awareness, is that, as what I alluded to before, is maybe helping them set up these accounts, because then the next person that comes along cannot potentially set up these accounts. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that setting up a login.gov or ID.me account is easy. There is lots of verifications that are involved there. They go out of their way to make sure that the wrong person isn't able to establish that. But the most foolproof way in order to prevent somebody from establishing one of those accounts is to establish one of those accounts for yourself, establish your own username and password, And then there's lots of benefits that you have when you do have these accounts. And then for me, going back to my anecdote as with my dad, by helping him with his my Social Security account, what we're able to do is I'm able to get him benefit verifications, 1099s. I'm able to update his address or banking information. So him and I are able to have some control over his account. And then, like I said, as a preventive tool, no one's able to go and establish an account for him because he doesn't access the internet unless it's through me. So you are a bit of a target if that is the case because you're not going to have any awareness that someone might be establishing that. But I'll be on here. Willing to take questions after the next part of the presentation is over. But thank you so much for your time, everybody, and thank you, Achieva, for having me on today. This is fantastic that we can all partner together because this is obviously a big problem that many in Pennsylvania should be aware of.
Great. Thank you, Frank, so much. Frank and I have been working together for about the last year and a half, and I'm always amazed when I hear him speak about all the different ways people can be scammed and people can be taken advantage of. It happens very easily. I think people think they could never fall victim to it, but in fact, it happens pretty easily. So really appreciate all that information. Frank, would you be willing to answer a couple of questions right now?
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay. So the first question is, when, if ever, would you give out your Social Security number over the internet?
I probably wouldn't. And I mean, I guess the only situation I would think about would be, and the only time that I have is when I know that I'm doing a legitimate deal with a financial company. Otherwise, I think nowadays I think in some cases, I think it's asked for more than it necessarily needs to, and to have just always pausing and saying to yourself, when what's the necessity for the Social Security number is going to potentially keep you out of trouble, or just basically asking, do you necessarily need that? But you're going to need it if you're getting mortgages, if you're opening out car loans. You're going to have to do it obviously when you file your taxes. But let me use that last example. As an example, in certain cases, I know that certain community groups will require that an individual has a Social Security card in order to give them tax preparation help. And sometimes we'll talk about how that's a requirement. But even though your Social Security number, will be shared with the tax preparer, that's not a requirement. That's an internal requirement of that agency in order to get that help. I only use that as an example of it might not be necessary for you to have that information in order to get that help. So just knowing, as you're throwing that football, that Social Security number, just knowing where it's going to land is going to be the most important part of that. And if you have any hesitation, then you should, probably, maybe leave it blank. I've been in doctors' offices where, their questionnaires have the Social Security number on there. They might be or requesting the Social Security number. They might be, looking at that for billing data, but I try to keep it off of there. I mean, for a doctor's office I've already been to, they probably already have that in the records. So I basically avoid it as much as possible unless I know that entity, I know that I need to do business with this entity where it's required.
Great. Thank you, Frank. And Kay, to answer your next question, will the presentation be available? We are recording it, and I will get back to everyone and let them know how they can find this presentation for viewing in the future. So thank you so much for that. Frank, thank you again so much. I'd like to turn it over to Matthew Trott from the Area Agency on Aging, the Division Director for GCAC. Here in Erie. Again, Matt and I have worked together many times over the years, and he's a wealth of information. And Matt, I'm so grateful that you're able to be here today. I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Hopefully you can hear me. As Catherine said, I'm sharing my screen now so that my PowerPoint can come through. One of the things that goes so well with this presentation is the fact that Social Security has so many of these scams and financial things going on. And realize that if you're in Pennsylvania and you're an older adult, age 60 or better, you have resources. I always use the qualification that Everyone understands what offices of children and youth do to protect young children under age of 18. In Pennsylvania, with the Pennsylvania Lottery and Pennsylvania law, the Older Adult Protective Services Act, we also have a system in place to protect older adults. And there's more of them. There's over 3 million individuals, residents of Pennsylvania, who are age 60 or better. And we have to do what we can to make sure those older adults are protected. The Aging and Disabilities Resource Center, through the PA Links, is a great way that entities such as Catherine and the Social Security Administration and a bunch of local entities and regional entities work together to protect our most vulnerable individuals. So realize that Older Adult Protective Services in Pennsylvania is under the auspices of the Pennsylvania Department of Aging, one of the cabinet level entities in Pennsylvania in the Commonwealth. And I share the agingpa.gov if you do have internet access and capabilities to go to that and learn everything you can about protective services. Part of what we want to do here today is make everyone aware that they can make a report of need at any time on anyone who's age 60 and better in Pennsylvania if you have any concerns. And I'll go through some of the more detailed things, but realize that Department of Aging in Pennsylvania is very great resource for all of us to have. So what is OAPS, Older Adult Protective Services? The Department of Aging, like I said, they've appointed every area agency on aging. And there's over 600 of them across the country. And here in Pennsylvania, the Department of Aging has appointed the area agencies on aging to provide this protective services under the Protective Services Law from 1988. The area agencies on aging throughout Pennsylvania are a little different in each county. Some of them are parts of county government. 33 counties throughout Pennsylvania have an area agency on aging, and 19 of us, including us at the Greater Erie Community Action Committee in Erie County, are a private nonprofit, and we're designated to be the area agency on aging back in the 1970s under the Older Americans Act. So realize they look a little different, but we all follow the same protective services regulation throughout the Commonwealth, and that resource is available to you. Before I go on, there's one important note, and if you call an area agency on aging or you call the Department of Aging, make sure if someone has immediate need for attention, whether that's medical attention or law enforcement. I always use the thing, if someone's getting mugged on the street, you don't call protective services, call 911, help immediately. Make sure that if someone has that need for immediate attention, call 911 first and foremost. But if it's not exactly that immediate of a need and you need that first and foremost response, the statewide Elder Abuse Hotline is available, 1-800-490-8505. You'll get sick of me saying that number because I'll say it a lot. We want to drill it into everyone's repertoire that they could call that number. And again, the key is anyone can call on any concerns for an older adult at any time of the day, week, month, year. So 1-800-490-8505. You can also contact your area agency on aging. If you know who your local area agency on aging is and you have their contact information, you can contact them, and they have ways to take what we call reports of need. So again, that Older Adult Protective Services is the law in Pennsylvania. It is also mandated. And what Older Adult Protective Services does is it investigates concerns regarding abuse, neglect, exploitation, and abandonment of an older adult over age 60. Mental note for everyone to know on the call, because if you have concerns for someone who's under age 60, like I said, children and youth offices can take reports for child line and child cases. But if someone's 18 to 59 years old in Commonwealth, you can still call that number and make a report that will be handled by a different entity than the Area Agency on Aging, but we can still take a report, and the Department of Human Services in Pennsylvania helps provide assistance to those individuals. Again, 24-hour hotline. The other thing I wanted to highlight with when you make a call to that hotline, that can be on behalf of anyone in Pennsylvania. Any older adult you see that you feel may have need for protective services, and realize that if you call that number, you are completely anonymous. You do not have to give name or contact. You can just say, I see this person. What we really ask for is if you know the person's name or their exact location at the time you're making that, we have to have a way as the Area Agency on Aging to go out and meet with that person, as I'll describe later. So realize that under that law, you can remain totally anonymous and be protected from any kind of report that you make under the law. So it's very important so that people don't feel hesitant to call the number. So how do you call? Again, like I said, you can call that 1-800-490-8505 number any time of the day. They'll ask some pertinent questions to identify who the older adult is that you're making the reference to, or the 18 to 59-year-old, if that's the case. But when it's an older adult, then they will relay that information. It's all done electronically, which is nice, to the Area Agency on Aging, someone locally who will be able to go out and see that individual and basically eliminate their risk is what we are tasked to do. So when should you call? Like I said, if there's immediate medical attention, call 911. But if you believe that there's an older Pennsylvania, age 60 or better, who may be a victim of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or abandonment, I'll go into details on those 4 different criteria. Call the number and make a report. We want to make sure that older adults are protected. And unfortunately, it's eyes and ears out there in the community. Be that nosy neighbor. Go ahead and make a call. At the very least, and you'll see through my presentation, even if it's not something that has to be immediately rectified, we can at least make a referral to other services through the Area Agency on Aging and our entire aging and disabilities resources through the PA link for assistance if it's not an immediate thing. Again, I've already talked about, one of the other things I wanted to highlight is that, again, you're protected, you're anonymous. The law requires that we cannot divulge the source of someone that makes a report. There are 2 kinds of reports. Voluntary is that a neighbor, a friend, relative, a non-professional. But if you are a professional in the state of Pennsylvania, an employee or an administrator of a long-term care facility, whether it's a personal care boarding home or a nursing facility or a hospital, you have a requirement under the Pennsylvania law to make a report of need. And those reports actually take a higher precedence because we do contact those individuals. So part of the professional realm is to make sure that reports are mandatorily made. It's very similar with the younger withdrawal line also. Realize it's a 1-800-490-8505 number, so it's toll free. Please call that. Nowadays, everybody has a cell phone, so please do that. One of the unfortunate things I want to relay to help make awareness for everyone is that these numbers of reports we get at area agencies on aging and across the Commonwealth have exponentially increased every year. You see on the slide from 2016, we used to get 28,633 reports across the entire state of Pennsylvania. And there's more older adults, like I said, now over 3 million older adults in Pennsylvania. So there's more older adults and there's more older adults in need, unfortunately. We also have a caregiver crisis currently. So a lot of our older adults are in need through no fault of their own. Just not enough caregivers out there, and these show it. Here in Erie County, it used to be very simple. When I remember the statistics, we used to get one report a day. We used to get 365 reports in a year. That was back in the 2017 era. Now, post-COVID, we're getting over 2,000 reports of need in a year. So we have increased. Well, like this slide shows, 55% increase in the past 5 years since 2019. And one of the other things I wanted to highlight, there's two main things that an area agency on aging does for reports of need. We either substantiate what was reported, meaning that older adult needs services, or we unsubstantiate it. There's no way to prove it's the he said, she said, or something happened that we can't go out and remedy. So I'll get more into details on those too in a little bit. The other thing we do when we receive a report of need through that, whether it's a 1-800 number or someone calls an area agency on aging, is we classify whether it's an emergency, which means we need to go out immediately as soon as we can find that older adult, and we can face-to-face meet with that older adult. Those are emergency categorizations. There's also priority categorizations where we can maybe wait 24, we have to see that person within 24 hours. And then there's non-priority, which means maybe we have a few days. We have 72 hours before we really need to go out on that call. And then a lot of the calls we get, well intended, but again, may not need the adult protective services. So those are called no needs, and we still go out and visit with those individuals. When should a person call? So I've already talked about as long as you have any reasonable cause to believe, and that's highlighted in red here, that an older adult may need protective services, give a call. If anything, even if it's a no need, the lowest categorization of those will at least provide referrals and follow-up contacts from all sorts of entities and support networks throughout communities. Now I'll go into the details of what is considered abuse, what's considered neglect, what's considered exploitation, and what's considered abandonment. First and foremost, abuse. We all know when somebody is hit or beaten, especially when a caregiver or a family member beats an older adult, that is pretty obvious physical abuse. You know, there's bruises, there's things you can visibly may see it or witness it, and it's not okay. Please call and let us go out there. Sometimes in those cases, I want to impart, it's just the fact that a caregiver is way overwhelmed. It's a difficult job being a caregiver, so it's no fault of their own. Sometimes people just get to their wits' end, and it's not all right, and they need to know that they have supports, like I said, throughout the community through Aging and Disabilities Resources. So physical abuse. There's emotional abuse. The training that the Department of Aging does has a stage where an older adult is just being verbally assaulted by a caregiver or a family member and belittled in public, and that's not all right. That also is a sign that their older adult is being abused and may need some services through protective services. The other kind is sexual abuse. Even though older adults, they are also sexually active, and yes, there can be sexual abuse no matter what the age. Unfortunately, even in facilities and the like, those things happen, and everyone needs to know that there is a response that can be done for those cases. The second area is neglect. One of the biggest things we see now, and we've seen it even more so since March of 2020 when COVID began, is self-neglect. Older adults are proud, they try and do things for themselves, and sometimes their physical or their cognitive, their mental abilities just aren't there to be able to provide their own needs. So a lot of times self-neglect is a lot of the reports we get. Things that fall under this category can also be hoarding issues. When you get an older adult who has a hoarding situation that puts them in imminent risk for physical health, that can also fall under the self-neglect category. The other one, like I said, is caregiver neglect. Remember, if sometimes the caregiver is just overwhelmed and needs to know that there is support available to them. The third area is exploitation. I think exploitation, especially in light of Frank's great presentation of Social Security, those scams and frauds and financial exploitation of vulnerable older adults is unfortunately running rampant in our society. So if you have a concern that someone is being financially exploited, their assets, whether that's cash on hand, assets in the bank, or property or something like that, and you feel they are being exploited as an older adult, remember, exploitation means that someone is using something against them or frauding them in some way. Please call us. We have a statewide team of financial experts that are great at getting bank records. We can request bank records. We can get all sorts of financial information for those situations. The best thing is to call us as soon as possible. Much like Frank said with Social Security, sometimes we can't get the money back. Sometimes, a lot of times, these frauds and scams are happening outside of not only our Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but outside the country, the United States. And sometimes those monies are lost. But we keep track of those, and we provide as much assistance so that it won't happen again, including what we're doing today, awareness and public education on the needs out there. Other things are medication diversion. Substance abuse issues happen a lot in our world. Older adults are usually taken advantage of from a perpetrator who may have a substance abuse issue, whether that's opiate addictions or other medication addictions, drug or other addictive behaviors, and they are basically taking advantage of older vulnerable adults, especially vulnerable adults who are prescribed pain medications that they must have. And that can happen both in facilities and out in the community. So exploitation involves also medication diversion. Finally, abandonment. Abandonment is just what it sounds like. If you become a caregiver that is relied upon by an older adult and you just walk away without providing the care that was expected by that older adult, you can be charged with abandonment under Pennsylvania criminal law and statutes. And we help make sure area agencies on aging and Department of Aging that caregivers are provided in those cases. So please call before it ever gets to an abandonment, or if you're aware of somebody that has been abandoned by their caregiver, call so we can provide support. Like I said, who's at risk? Cognitive impairments. As we age, we sometimes don't remember things. That makes us easy victims to be preyed upon. You also have to rely on caregivers and maybe socially isolated. It might just be you and the caregiver in the house. And older adults, sometimes those caregivers take advantage of those situations. Accessible assets, like I said before, houses, cash, debit cards. Following right with the previous presenter, it's a scam and it's a fraud and it's against the law. And like I said, substance abuse, sometimes mental illness too, not only by the caregiver, but by the older adult, can lead to bad actions. So what are the things to look for if you are aware of an older adult or around an older adult? Again, bruises, unexplained injuries, wounds, especially left untreated. Unattended medical needs is a key reason to call older adult protective services. Unless that medical needs immediate treatment, then call 911 and make sure they get an ambulance or some initial medical attention. Changes in behaviors, isolation, refusals that exhibit of fear and paranoia, especially around an individual. You almost can sense it sometimes. And if you have those concerns, your best bet is to just call. Realize there's you can make a report and we will investigate and use all the resources available throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to assist that older adult or their caregiver if that's the need. The lack of personal hygiene, that's a big one for that self-neglect area. A lot of times it's just physically not able to take baths or be safe anymore to take a bath. And the older adult, other people would recognize that and realize that something needs to be done. Weight loss, changes in eating habits, a lot of these things individually may not be a definite, but if you have any concerns, your best bet is to call that 1-800 number. Financial changes, powers of attorney, and a lot of times we need those. Older adults have to have, someone to be in charge in case they can't make those decisions. But if there's concerns with that, we can look into it. New friends really comes down to those associations. Transient individuals tend to be those that may have substance abuse or the other things. So when there is a new quote unquote friend that is kind of isolating an older adult, that's also a red flag. We can look into those cases. We can at least do a face-to-face with the older adult to let them know that they may not have to rely on just one person, or at least let them know that someone can assist them in helping to limit their risks. So in those cases of financial exploitation, I wanted to highlight that during this presentation because it is first and foremost about scams and frauds. So no matter who interacts, if you can report that financial exploitation. There's a lot of it going on. Financial things are getting more and more complicated anymore, especially more and more stressful and challenging to households and individuals as costs go up, inflation, especially for older adults on fixed income. And it is key for an unbiased entity like the Area Agencies on Aging to at least take a look and see if we can assist older adults to get their control over their assets. They have the right to do with their assets what they want. So don't feel like we'll come in and overpower an older adult's wishes. If that older adult wishes to give a grandchild a lot of money, they can do that. It's just if they do it under some sort of exploitation, like in exchange for getting their medications and stuff like that, is just not right. So much like a lot of Frank's presentation said, help with finances, make sure you're dealing with someone you fully trust, not somebody just over the phone, not somebody you've just recently met. Make sure you've a trusted individual when you share your financial information. Never provided personal information, and that includes your social security number. So as Frank went over that very well. Secure your checkbook and other sensitive documents, and don't sign any documents unless you understand that. There's 5 criteria when we get a report of need that have to be met before we open up a protective service investigation. I wanted to highlight that for everyone. First of all, the adult must be residing in Pennsylvania. If somebody's out of state or out of the country, we're not going to be able to do anything for protective services. In those instances, especially if they're in another state, we can refer directly to the Area Agency on Aging in that jurisdiction. So it's not like we leave people out to dry. If we get a report and they're not in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we can make sure that at least somebody can look at them in their locality. Older adult must be 60 years of age or better, as I said. And the older adult it must be, like it said, reasonable to believe that they are at imminent risk of danger to their person or their property. So that's both their physical as well as their assets. And then the fourth criteria is believe that that older adult may be incapacitated in some way, which means they're unable to assist themselves. That could be physical incapacitation, that could be mental, cognitive incapacitation, or that could be some other way that they are incapacitated to be able to help themselves to maintain their physical or mental health. They need assistance is the bottom line for that criteria. And then the final one is They don't have someone to provide that assistance. They don't have a responsible caretaker. So, like I said before, there's mandatory reports in facilities. So facilities may have a responsible caretaker in that facility, but we will investigate cases to make sure that those facilities and those caretakers are doing what they need to, which is why they are mandatory reporters. Another thing is to make sure that the necessary care is being provided to those older adults. Sometimes it's historical. Sometimes a year ago, an older adult had this happen to them. We'd at least document that for the record, and I'll explain how long we keep those records in a second. So again, we'll go out and do an initial face-to-face visit with that individual. They can refuse. They have the right to self-determination. So older adults have the rights as long as they are still mentally able to choose that. And we will also contact their medical professionals, whether that's a primary care physician or any hospital visits they've had, especially in cases of abuse. That's usually well documented. We'll contact the person that is an alleged perpetrator that may be doing something against the older adult's will, and we will interview them separately. There are some instances where we may not talk to that perpetrator, especially in those domestic violence situations. Sometimes it gets worse if you agitate the perpetrator, but in the meantime, we still work with the older adult. Lastly, if there's a legal guardian, power of attorney, rep payee, especially in financial exploitation cases, we will contact them and get that information to see if there's substantiated cause for risk to be reduced. Informal contacts will contact neighbors. Our protective services staff at all the area agencies on aging are trained down in Harrisburg, or virtually they've done some of them, but they go through a 3 to 5 day training, and they get yearly refreshing classes and trainings on how to be good investigators, quite frankly, and what to look at. They contact family, friends, neighbors of that older adult to get a picture of what's going on. And a lot of times that helps with identifying who can be a part of their care plan going forward. Professional contacts are also made for everything from law enforcement, financial institutions, and anyone else that may be involved. Realize a lot of times hoarding situations have multiple pets too. So realize we work with local humane societies or whatever for the cruelty to animals, and that to support to make sure that those pets who are family members are also protected. Investigation, we are usually required to finish those investigations in 20 days. So we'll do a face-to-face, whether it's an emergency and we do it immediately, or whether it's a non-priority and we do it within 72 hours. After about 20 days, we should have a determination of what that older adult is, whether it's substantiated and we confirm the allegations and there's a need for furtherance and care plan and risk reduction, or whether it's just unsubstantiated. After doing all these interviews and contacts and documenting that in our statewide database that the Department of Aging controls, it may be unsubstantiated. If it's, I can tell you that of all those tens of thousands of reports we get a year across the Commonwealth, 36,000 of them are investigated, and about 1/3 of that, 13,000 of them are substantiated every year. So realize that 28% of those are financial exploitation cases, like was told earlier, and 46% of those, the abusers are a family member or someone in their household. Like I said before, I already said that older adult has the right to self-determination. There's also, if a perpetrator is identified during the course of our investigation, we will refer, if there's criminal activity, to law enforcement, but older adult protective services is not law enforcement. We let law enforcement handle those investigations for criminal activity, but we have to report to law enforcement if we believe there may be criminal activity. And if a perpetrator is named and substantiated in our report, they do have a legal right to appeal that that designation as a perpetrator, and they do that through the Department of Aging, not with the individual area agency on aging. Um, any substantiated case that is confirmed that the reports and the allegations are in need of a response are kept for 3 years only. After 3 years, they're purged out of the system. For unsubstantiated cases, even if that means they don't meet all those 5 criteria of being an older adult living in Pennsylvania, is age 60 plus, and has those capacity or caregiver needs, um, um, the unsubstantiated cases are deleted after 6 months. Um, we also delete the perpetrator and reporter information. Like I said, that reporter is totally anonymous, but we will actually even delete it out of the database, and there will be no record of that after 6 months. And again, we delete the reporter immediately as soon as it's determined unsubstantiated. So realize that the protective services in Pennsylvania, under the law and the extensive regulations that we have, are very well to protect that data, and everything's through encrypted services that are controlled by the state. Finally, to wrap it up, elder abuse statistics, we know, especially post-COVID, what the reports we get are literally just the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, for every case that is reported on elder abuse, we know that there's 23 more that probably don't even come to light. And that is a shame. And that's one of the reasons I do these presentations, to encourage anyone to make a call to that number, 1-800-490-8505, if you have any concerns regarding an older adult age 60 or better in the Commonwealth, so that the rest of this iceberg could be addressed. We have a lot of resources in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As you all know, the Pennsylvania Lottery is dedicated towards older adults. It creates about $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year worth of resources that go back to older adults in Pennsylvania. And that's a lot of resources and a lot that can be provided in assistance. Again, a couple of the key things I just want to final wrap up and highlight is that number is 1-800-490-8505. And if there's immediate attention, medical or law enforcement, call 911 first. You can always follow it up with a call to the statewide elder abuse hotline if needed. And that was all I had. If there's any questions that are answers, I can.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. Recently I had the experience where I needed to call Matt to get a phone number for a adult protective services worker in another county. I had to give this information to a colleague who had someone who he was nervous was not taking care of himself. The process was so easy. All I did was call. I gave the person I spoke with the information that was needed, and she took it from there. So it really is very easy to voice your concerns. And as Matt said, it's everybody's job, if you see something that doesn't look right, to just report it and let them take it from there. If it's not substantiated, it's not substantiated, but it's really all of our jobs to keep an eye on our neighbors living in the Commonwealth. So let me just see if we have any questions. An anonymous person said, I never thought I would be a victim. 2 weeks ago, we were scammed out of $7,000. It was slick and seemed so professional. So these scammers are skillful people. Wow, I could not have said it better. A lot of people just think they couldn't fall victim to it because you would see it coming, but not in 2024. People are very sly with the way that they are presenting information, and it's just very easy to fall victim to some of these scams. So thank you for that comment. Any other?
Yeah, if I could.
Oh, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
If I could respond to that quickly, don't feel embarrassed at all. The sophistication of the scams being perpetrated against, let alone older adults, but every one of us in society, is incredible. I've even we get presentations from the Attorney General's office and all sorts of things in addition to Frank and the Social Security, but realize there are cases where You think you've won the lottery. Oh, that's a scam. Well, guess what? They'll put a check. They will deposit $1 million in your checking account. You will look at your checking account and confirm with the bank, hey, there's $1 million in there. Then they will ask you to send them money, and you do because, hey, my bank says there's $1 million. Guess what? In 3 or 4 days, the bank realizes that it's a fraudulent check or other transaction and then takes the money out of your account. In the meantime, you are out your money. So even if they put the money into your account, please wait and verify and work with your bank. They all have great scam, fraud, and prevention associates. I was just talking to an individual the other day who worked with his bank when he got frauded. So don't feel embarrassed. Please report it, because if it happened to you, it'll probably happen to hundreds of other people, if not thousands, as well as realize we are all aware that that can happen to anyone on any given day, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about because they are really sophisticated, especially now with the, like Frank said, the way they can morph and fake that they're someone you know and trust. So caution is the best thing, and awareness, and report it. Even if you think, well, yeah, I'm out that money, at least report it for the benefit of everyone else. If we see a pattern of multiple reports from alleged perpetrators, that's one of the reasons the state has this in place. We can do other things. And like I said, the law enforcement, Attorney General's office can also respond when there's multiple requests. So thank you.
So Matt, let me just say that scenario that you just mentioned happened to somebody that I know. It looked like the money was in her. It was in her account. So whatever it was she was selling, she gave to the person. And then a couple days later, she was told that money is not in your account. So you are exactly right. And this was 4 or 5, 6 years ago. So things have evolved even more so since then. So Matt is right. Don't be embarrassed. These things happen. People are just very sly with the way that they're doing things. So there is one more question that I think, Matt, you and maybe Frank might want to respond to this. Says, I am 53. Is this the form for reporting scams I should be going to? So maybe you guys could talk about if this person feels that they've been scammed, what is the process?
You can definitely call that 1-800-490-8505 number and report it. Like I said, they take reports of need for all ages 18 and above. If it's under 18, you want to call the child line specifically, but you can report it. Like I said, unfortunately, they probably won't get your money back, but you can still report it and let the what's called Adult Protective Services, 18 to 59-year-old, through Department of Human Services, provide any support that they can. So, yes, that reporting line is for all ages 18 and above.
Because reporting it is so important, because if
right.
someone's trying to scam you, I promise you they're trying to scam the next person too. And if you report it and the next person reports it, the next person reports it, pretty soon they will be caught because multiple people are reporting it. Frank, would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more. There are a couple things I didn't touch on in my presentation that I will, because this is coming up. Number one, it's whether it's the Social Security Administration, if it did involve us, our OIG does exactly what you're talking about. We're proactively trying to see these scams that take place on an active level, and then by it being reported, it might be a case in which we might not be able to get the money back. But by it being reported, you can prevent it from happening in other places. One thing that occurred to me while both of you were kind of talking was when the call, when the scams were prevalent with individuals were calling, they were sophisticated enough to spoof. The term is spoof, which is the caller ID of your phone would pop up as saying Social Security. In certain situations, there was even able to pop up the number of a local field office to give them legitimacy, to kind of give you, once again, how this sophisticated and all the different aspects that'll go out of their way to kind of like convince you of the legitimacy and then the design of that scam. But going back to the original question there, who you call, and as we recommend, the the state lines, the federal lines, and everything like that sometimes will depend on you. Sometimes the first most necessary call will be to put fraud, scam stops on your accounts, on your credit cards, on your financial. So that's gonna depend on you. But as soon as it happens so often when people get off the phone, they're like, wait a minute, everything slows down. They're not in this high pressure environment. Oh my gosh, I've just been scammed. The calls that you make are going to be specific to you as a person, and it's going to start with your bank. It's going to start with your credit cards. It's going to start with those specific things because all of them have these situations in place where everything can just be turned off, and that might be the greatest prevention tool for you because then it just doesn't happen. Now, is that inconvenience for you? Absolutely, but we all work so hard for the money that's in our accounts or the money that might be put on those credit cards. So to that question, it does depend. But after you're doing that, after you put your own oxygen mask on, reporting these things to the necessary agencies allows these agencies to then go and prevent it from happening to other people.
And all of the banks and the credit card companies they have someone available 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
7 days a
Yeah.
week. So even if this happens on a Saturday or a Sunday, call the number on the back of the card and say, I think I've been scammed. I need my account to be locked immediately. That
Yep.
will give you a little bit of time to just take a deep breath and just
Yep.
try, get your head together a little bit and call the numbers that Frank and Matt have just given you. Because again, the importance of reporting it, we cannot say strongly enough how important it is to report it.
Yep.
Frank and Matt, I have a question for both of you that maybe one or both of you can answer. What do you think the role of artificial intelligence plays into scams? Do you think that is going to see scams be improving even more than they are now?
Yeah. Well, the thing is even though I encourage so much of individuals preventing that information from getting out there. I think we all live in a world now where we have to assume our information is already out there. I'm a federal employee. There's been data breaches as far as federal employees are concerned. I'm a veteran. There's been data breaches as far as veterans are concerned. There's a lot of different ways. There's different health network breaches that take place. So let's just live in a world where we assume that all that information is out there and that we're just always going to be a target and no amount of prevention can stop it from taking place. Once we start living in that world, to your point, AI is going to best consolidate for these individuals. Now, that information, so they're going to be able to assemble and bring together information, profile you better, or it maybe even like from that standpoint, put you up higher on that list. But the thing is that don't forget that these individuals work in mass. So when they send out that text, they send out that email, they might send it to 100,000 people. There might only be 3 people that respond to that. Now, I'm kind of 100,000, but that's kind of the point. 99.9% of us are going to delete 99.5, but they're just looking for that one person that's going to click. So AI is going to help better to identify individuals. And once again, and this is horrible, and this is what makes me so angry about the whole situation, is it's probably going to profile. And many times they're going to profile these individuals that are older, that had not lived in this digital environment as long, and maybe better identify these individuals as targets, which is, honestly so sad. But that's where they're making their money. Matt had talked about that, so that's where I envision it's going to become more sophisticated. We're going to be more victimized, and people are going to know more about us in order to trick us into doing things. And AI should will probably help in that regard.
And one thing we didn't talk too much about are passwords and the importance of keeping your passwords in a safe place, not using the same password for everything, not keeping your password stored on your computer. That's like a whole nother training that we should do. But passwords are really, really important. And knowing, maybe getting a little notebook and keeping it in your desk about where all of your passwords are for each account that you have. Because if you have them stored online, they're open. If somebody gets into your computer, they've got access to all of your stuff. So it's really important to make sure that your passwords are protected as well. Matt, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to kind of dovetail into that. I mean, artificial intelligence, any computers it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, there are times
Yep.
that it can be used unscrupulously, and there are times, and I'm aware of a lot of efforts, both federally and statewide and locally, where we use it to hopefully prevent these types of things, much like the webinar we're doing now. So um, um, don't be fearful, but be cautious and be aware that anything can be quote unquote scammed or stolen from you. A buyer beware is the bottom line. That gentleman I talked to the other day about his banking issues that he worked with his bank for, same thing. I just said it's buyer beware. You still may need to use a credit card when you go to a hotel or rent a car, but you have to rely on the fraud and prevention. So just as many bad actors that are out there in the world, there's good people, most of them on the call here too, that are trying to help and make sure you call to get that help. Don't feel like you're alone, and don't, like I said, don't feel embarrassed that it happened to you, because at some point it's happened to almost all of us. Like Frank showed, 1 out of 5. I think those numbers are even higher when you go to that tip of the iceberg thing. So.
Great. Well, Matt, Frank, thank you both so much for this wonderful information. Katie, thank you so much for interpreting for us today. We really appreciate it. Kathy Freeman, thank you so much for being on and telling us a little bit about what the Pennsylvania Link does. Guys, thank you all so much. I hope everyone has a great day. We'll see everybody soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.